Hey, I'm GC, and this is not the Dragon Quest IX episode. I know, I'm sorry. It's coming. But for now, let's talk about Pyre, the newest title from our familiar friends, Supergiant Games. From the creators of Bastion and Transistor comes another action RPG that tells a story of what once was rather than what is. It's important to understand that Pyre resembles its predecessors in this way because it's imperative to its message, and because it's the best out of all three. It's hectic, with action at the forefront and RPG mechanics providing a solid backbone. Its presentation is focused on building intrigue and providing context. Its story positive and to the point, and it doesn't rely on gimmicks. There's no consistent narrator spouting off dialogue, no long-winded asides about a piece of lore just because you looked at it. Pyre is what happens when Supergiant Games takes what little overextension they do and pulls back. It is the most cohesive, engaging, succinct, and thoughtful title they have ever produced yet. And it's a sports game.
Two-man game. Blake Griffin explodes on.
In honor of the surprise.
Oh, slid right past.
You might be skeptical as to how far that joke goes, but Pyre's got all the pieces for a spectacular sports game. Two teams pass, shoot, and tackle to get a ball into one of two holes. That's a sports ball, dudes, and a good one at that. On defense, Pyre is about applying pressure and trapping your opponents in tackles. Whether that means running through them or casting a spell from a distance is up to you, but opponents caught in either are banished and leave the field for a short period of time. But getting tackled isn't only a danger for the offense. Defense can also mean stalling the other team until your banished players come back. On offense, Pyre is about smart passing and fast reflexes. Because only one of your players can be controlled at any time, any team-fronted attack poses a greater risk should it fail. Lose one unit and you have another ready to defend against the turnover. Get them all banished and your Pyre's left open for a mollywhopping. Possession of the ball in Pyre is extremely volatile. It changes hands every couple of seconds, and at times when neither team has possession, the match becomes a scramble to get it. And even that has its tug-of-war strategy that'll leave you banishing opponents before ever making your way to the ball, or throwing the ball away on purpose to bait the other team into a trap. It's obvious that Pyre gives the player plenty with which to explore their own playstyles. There's a lot of room for creativity within the rules, and having multiple stages with different layouts gives you the sense that there's new strategies to find and make better use of. The question here is, how long before you fall into the comfort of the same game plan every match or specific stage? Because most sports games do a good job of pulling creative and critical thinking out of you, but eventually you settle into what you're comfortable with. Pyre has its own way of combating that, by making the player you scored with unplayable until the next successful attack by either team. Your team composition changes dramatically depending on who scores, and consistently attacking your opponent's Pyre requires you to outplay them outnumbered. And it means you're going to treat every player on your team equally. You're going to learn to use all of them sufficiently. There's a fair balance between offensive and defensive play. Any offensive maneuver has a defensive counter, and every defensive tactic has a weakness to be exploited. It's the vast amount of options and the demand they put on the player that makes the sport of Pyre an engrossing one. Teams may only consist of 3 players, but you have a bigger selection to choose from. The different races of the world of Pyre move differently, tackle differently, and deal different amounts of damage. This further complicates the game, and it's how Pyre forces you out of your comfort zone. It wants you to build team compositions with players whose movement types work well together, and find combinations that counter the many opposing teams' setups. It'll sometimes prevent certain players from participating in a match, and create enemy matchups that aren't always in your favor. As you grasp the sport more and more, it wants you to activate modifiers to increase the difficulty of future matches in return for more experience gains for your players. And Pyre wants you to keep it that way, to associate leaving your comfort zone with enlightenment and gain. Trinkets you can buy and equip to your characters give them bonuses when performing certain actions. Each player's skill tree offers up new playstyles. Your personal opinions and reactions to their questions and struggles alter their stats for upcoming matches, and sometimes permanently. Wait, what? And here's where Pyre does what Bastion and Transistor don't, and that makes everything outside of the sport matter to the sport. Pyre is one half sports game, another half storybook. It reminds me a lot of text-based adventures, but without the groups. Actually, there's one part where you fight things coming out of the darkness. Is that on purpose? Are they trying to make that reference? It's really weird. It never happens again. Hopefully neither will this tangent. Wouldn't visual novel be the more contemporary term? No! Visual novels suck! I will die on this hill. Visual novels also don't have the amazing user interface that Pyre uses to build its world. Highlighted terms provide definitions and additional information when you hover over them, and there's plenty of items in your team's wagon with bits of lore. It's a genius way of cutting down all that expository dialogue and toning down the eventually grating persistence of the narrator that plagued Bastion and Transistor. Anyone who wants to explore the lore can on their own time, in their own way. Anyone who doesn't care doesn't have to. This is a translation of Supergiant Games' world-building trademark. It's all still there. All the intrigue and bits of lore you love are just presented in a more easily digestible form. You even get a new narrator that commentates every match in a condescending, demeaning tone directly to you. This one doesn't drone on for 17 years about your favorite pizza place, or the guy that turned to stone in World 1 that never matters after that. He sounds a bit like Jack Black too.
You elude banishment using such tricks.
LSD works in mysterious ways.
He's also the same narrator from Bastion.
Now here's a kid whose whole world got all twisted, leaving him stranded on a rock in the sky.
Burning remnants of monstrosities felled by the scribes themselves. Dare you to stand against them in their fury?
This dude has so much range and deserves way more work. His name's Logan Cunningham. Hire this man. And I'm not typically picky about control schemes and menu navigation, but Pyre's is really good. Everything is available with the push of a button. Pulling up your equip screen at a shop window is such a good feeling, you guys. It's like getting your straw through the hole in the lid on the first try. Nice. It isn't enough for the UI to have smart shortcuts and quality of life functions that I think every narrative, text box heavy game should have from now on, period. Pyre's writing, the way it ties you into the story and how it has you interact with its characters, is fantastic. You are the reader. It's as literal a title as it is a figurative one. You're literate. As the reader, you possess the ability to read the Book of Scribes and navigate the stars it corresponds to that guide your team to their next match. You also have the power to read a person's thoughts and emotions. One would say you can read them like a book.
Banishment.
Because of these powers, you're made the leader of the team. While you can't directly participate in the rites, you can direct the players through your powers of telepathy using the Book of Scribes. Decisions from which paths to take to the next match to whether or not someone should shave their mustache are frequently presented to you and often grant boons or penalties depending. Don't laugh. Not everyone can rock a mustache. You gotta let them know. Like, check this abomination out. Yeah, I was a cop dad. But these aren't just gameplay elements you pick and move on from. They can be, but the characters you meet in Pyre are so full of mystery and so intimate with your character that your confidence in deciding begins to sway. Most of what you'll be choosing in Pyre won't be which path to take to the next match. It'll be whether or not to sit down with someone for a drink, giving your honest opinion about their appearance, deciding if knowing their past is more important than knowing their motives. How you respond to these characters can provide small bonuses to their stats, but there's more at work here. Choosing a road one character feels strongly about is bound to give you insight on them as a person. It'll also grant you the opportunity to hear them out back in the wagon and learn about them even more. You don't have to have the second conversation in the wagon, but choosing one character's idea over another and having to make intimate decisions like when an opinion is asked of you or when you have to choose between giving someone space or lending them an ear, that's the same directive Pyre uses in its gameplay, pulling you out of your comfort zone, putting you in a situation you might be apprehensive about putting yourself in. But those situations bring with them the potential for positive bonuses and positive conversation, and at times the decision you make might not be the one with the best obvious turnout for you. Pyre has done something to me that I can't say any other video game has done. Pyre, with its writing and atmosphere, has convinced me to lose a match for the sake of one of its characters. You sure make a lot of choices for your team, including who among them will gain their freedom, because in Pyre, you're all prisoners. And the sport you're playing is the only way out of the downside, a less than hospitable place. The sport of Pyre has pseudo-seasons, with each one punctuated by the Liberation Rite, the championship match between two teams that select one of their members as a candidate to be free of the downside should they win. The person that goes free might not wish to be yet, or even believe someone else should go first. Equally important, the person that goes free is gone, and that means they can't be used in future matches. So who do you choose? Who deserves their freedom more? What is freedom to those people? What is freedom to you? This is a question Pyre asks you explicitly and directly. What is freedom to you? What are you trying to be free of? Without saying too much, there's a lot to take away from Pyre. That's what puts it above anything Supergiant Games has made before. It explores a concept so thoroughly in the 10 to 20 hours you play it. I can't break it down in any reasonable amount of time, but I can perhaps show you the first steps to finding the freedom you might be seeking. And we've been talking about it this whole time. The first step to freedom is out of your comfort zone. I mean, it's a sport where you literally throw yourself into an actual fire to cleanse yourself. Hello. It's called the downside, as in the shitty thing. Its name is supposed to invoke a sense of despair. People hate it there. You're told it's impossible to live there. But it's also where our characters find enlightenment. It's where they forge bonds of support and change for the better. It's where they earn their freedom. The further you play Pyre, the less and less the downside seems like a torturous hell. Your team complains less about the hardships it brings, you collect trinkets and trophies of the places within it you visited. Your long, arduous journey from one end to the other quickly becomes a casual back and forth across its expanses. Wait, red, white, and blue uniform traveling across the land for pickup games? We're the Globetrotters! Eventually, you realize that leaving the downside isn't exactly in everyone's best interest. So does Pyre, because there aren't enough liberation rights left for everyone to leave. It'd be easy to accept this the same way we took to the downside, an ill omen that means nothing good for anyone. But as we come to understand that the downside is an actual downside meant to dissuade us from freeing ourselves of our guilt, our resentment, or our ignorance, so too do the liberation rights prove to be a mask that disguises where true enlightenment is found. Not fighting tooth and nail to return to the comforts of our past, but pushing forward in the discomfort of the present. Accepting that our actions, however aware of them we are, put us here. That where we are now is not the end of the world, but a new one. That change cannot come from the comforts we use to avoid growing pains. If you want freedom, if you want to break the chains that shackle you, the first step is to push beyond their lengths.
Bask in the purifying flame.
You guys gotta play Pyre. You gotta. Pyre is required reading. It is one of the best games I have played all year. Everything about Pyre serves to deliver its message, and all of it is done superbly. The action is fulfilling, and the management aspects are involved and heartfelt. I feel like Samuel L. Jackson. That's a Coach Carter reference. Alright. The writing is tight, and the presentation sets new standards I refuse to accept unreplicated. Beyond Bastion and Transistor, Pyre does more with the same amount of time and wastes none of yours. And that's all I got today. Until next time, my name's GC. Remember that you are amazing, and keep on playing positive.